Vampire King
Wake
dismissed her
up.
sickness as just
Look at
human
me.
frailty. He realizes it's
Can you hear me?
poisonous. The castle of Lord Kale stood on the edge of jagged cliffs, its black spires piercing the crimson sky. A thick mist curled around its base like a living serpent, hiding its foundations from the world below. For centuries, the castle had been a place of legend and fear. Many spoke of the vampire king who ruled within, an immortal being of cold beauty and merciless power. Few dared approach, and fewer still lived to tell of it. Alara had never intended to meet him. She was a scholar of rare herbs and forgotten remedies, sent by her village to study the plants that grew only near Kale's domain. She had read of the castle's dangers, of its dark guardian, yet curiosity outweighed fear. She moved through the mist with her satchel of dried herbs and parchment, her heart pounding with excitement and anxiety. The castle doors were massive, carved from black oak and reinforced with iron. When Alara pushed them open, a chill swept through her, as if the stones themselves whispered secrets of the centuries. She stepped inside, the echo of her boots swallowed by the immense hall. Shadows flickered along the walls, cast by tall, burning torches. The air smelled faintly of old blood and iron, and a strange tension hung like a living thing. Alara's presence did not go unnoticed. A servant, pale and silent, appeared from the shadows. His eyes were deep pools of black, reflecting no warmth. "The king receives visitors at his pleasure," he said softly, his voice like the sigh of wind through grave stones. "State your purpose." "I am Alara of Windmere," she replied, holding her head high despite the unease crawling up her spine. "I seek knowledge about the herbs that grow near your lands." The servant inclined his head, almost imperceptibly. "Wait here." He vanished down a long corridor, leaving her alone in the vast, silent hall. Minutes passed, or perhaps hours, for time seemed different here, before the servant returned. He gestured for her to follow. They moved silently through the castle, their footsteps echoing in the corridors, until they reached a grand chamber. A throne of black stone and silver stood at the far end, and on it sat Lord Kale. He was unlike anyone she had ever imagined. His hair was as dark as the midnight sky, his eyes a sharp, piercing crimson. His features were beautiful in a way that made the heart ache, a face that had seen centuries yet held no sign of age. When he spoke, his voice was deep, calm, and commanding. "You come from the human lands," he said, his gaze fixed on her, studying her as one might study an insect or a rare flower. "Why do you enter my castle uninvited?" Alara's fingers tightened on her satchel. "I mean no disrespect, your majesty. I come seeking knowledge. The plants in your domain are unlike any others. I wish to study them to help my people." Kale tilted his head slightly, his crimson eyes narrowing. "Many have come before you, few leave alive." Alara swallowed her fear, her pride refusing to bend. "I am not afraid of life or death. I seek only truth." For a long moment, Kale said nothing. Then he rose, his movements smooth and predatory. "Very well," he said finally. "You may study what you wish, but remember, life here is fragile, and humans even more so." Alara felt a shiver run through her. His words carried weight beyond their meaning. Still, she forced herself to smile politely. "I understand, your majesty. I will be careful." Days passed, and Alara worked tirelessly in the castle gardens, cataloging the strange plants and their unusual properties. She felt the weight of Kale's gaze even when he was not present, as if the very stones whispered to him about her actions. The vampire king appeared often, sometimes observing from a balcony, sometimes entering the garden silently, his presence both frightening and magnetic. Then, one morning, Alara felt a strange weakness. It began as a faint dizziness, a trembling in her hands as she held her notebook. She dismissed it, attributing it to the long hours of study and the unfamiliar air of the castle. Yet the sensation worsened as the day wore on. Her skin felt colder than usual, her heartbeat faint and uneven. When Kale appeared that evening, he noticed immediately. "You look pale," he said, his voice smooth but edged with concern. "Surely the work has not drained you so much." I feel a little unwell," Alara admitted, forcing a small smile. "Perhaps it is just fatigue. I am human after all." Kale's crimson eyes lingered on her. "Humans are fragile, yes," he said softly. "But even so, you should not appear so weak." "Do you think this illness will hinder your work?" Alara shook her head. "No, I will rest and continue tomorrow." Kale did not speak further, but he watched her as she moved away, a shadow of worry crossing his face, a thing unfamiliar to one so used to centuries of control. That night the castle seemed darker than usual. Alara lay in a guest chamber, her body shivering despite the thick blankets. The fire in the hearth flickered, casting dancing shadows across the stone walls. She tried to sleep but found herself restless, her mind filled with images of the strange herbs she had catalogued, the veins of the plants glowing faintly in the moonlight. Footsteps approached, slow and deliberate. The door opened and Kale stepped inside, his figure a silhouette against the pale glow of the moon. "You should not wander through the castle at night," he said, his voice calm but carrying an unspoken warning. "I am not wandering," Alara replied softly. "I am trying to rest." But sleep will not come. He moved closer, standing at the foot of her bed. For a long moment he said nothing, simply observing her as if measuring the depth of her weakness. "This is not fatigue," he said finally, his tone low, almost a growl. "Your pulse, it falters unnaturally. There is something wrong." Alara shook her head, trying to hide the fear rising in her chest. "It is nothing, just a passing sickness." Kale's eyes narrowed. "You are lying to yourself. This is no ordinary weakness. Humans do not fall so easily to such shadows." Before Alara could respond, he reached out, placing a hand lightly upon her wrist. His touch was cold yet electric, sending a shiver down her spine. He felt the tremor in her pulse, the faint corruption in her blood, and his expression darkened. "It is poison," he said, almost to himself. His voice, though low, carried the weight of centuries. "And not one from any mortal hand I know. This is ancient, enchanted. Someone sought to harm you, or perhaps the kingdom through you." Alara stared at him, fear and awe mingling in her chest. "Poison, but who would do such a thing?" Kale pulled back slightly, his eyes flashing with a crimson intensity. "That is what we must discover. And quickly, before it consumes you." Her heart raced, not just from the sickness but from the realization that she was at the mercy of a being whose life spanned centuries, whose power could protect or destroy her. And yet in that same moment she felt a strange connection, a bond forming between predator and human, between the immortal and the fragile. You will help me?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "I will protect you," Kale replied, his tone solemn. "But understand this, my protection is not gentle. It demands obedience, trust, and truth. Deceive me and the consequences are not human." Alara nodded, swallowing her fear. She had come seeking knowledge, but now she realized that knowledge came with dangers she had never imagined. She had stepped into a world of shadows, into the domain of a king who could crush her with a thought. And yet, something about him drew her closer, curiosity, fear, and a sense of destiny she could not name. Kale lingered in the room for a moment longer, his gaze never leaving her face. "Rest now," he said finally, "and prepare yourself. Tomorrow we uncover the source of this poison. If we fail—" His voice trailed off, leaving the threat unspoken, yet clear. As he left, Alara lay back against the pillows, her body trembling, her mind racing. She had believed her human frailty was the greatest danger she would face in this castle. Now she understood that her life, and perhaps her heart, was entwined with the immortal being who had dismissed her weakness as mere human frailty. Outside, the wind howled through the jagged cliffs, carrying with it the faint whispers of secrets long buried. And somewhere, hidden in the shadows, the force behind the poison stirred, aware that its prey had survived the first night, and that the vampire king was finally taking notice. The candlelight flickered and dimmed, leaving the room half in shadow. Alara closed her eyes, uncertain whether she feared the poison, the immortal king, or the strange, undeniable pull she felt toward him. The night had only just begun. The next morning the castle was shrouded in a thick, silver mist. The sun tried to break through, but the light was weak, barely touching the cold stone of the towers. Alara awoke with a strange heaviness in her limbs, a faint burning under her skin. Her pulse flickered like a candle struggling in the wind. She rose slowly, feeling the dizziness twist in her head. Every step to the window felt like walking through a river of lead. A shadow fell across the floor. Kale had been standing there silently, his crimson eyes fixed on her with an intensity that made her heart stammer. "You are weaker than last night," he said, his voice calm but carrying an unspoken warning. "I feel tired," Alara admitted, clutching her satchel. "But it is nothing. I can still work." Kale's gaze softened slightly, though the sharp edge never left his eyes. "Human pride is dangerous," he murmured. "It blinds you to threats." Alara looked away, embarrassed. She had always believed strength was measured in endurance and courage, yet here she was, fragile and trembling before a king who could bend the world with a thought. Kale moved closer, his long coat trailing silently over the stone floor. "Sit," he commanded. "You need to rest, but I must examine you." Alara hesitated. Pride screamed at her to refuse, yet she recognized the seriousness in his tone. She nodded and lowered herself onto a chaise by the hearth. Kale knelt beside her, placing one hand on her wrist. The warmth of life within her was faint, almost fading. His eyes narrowed, scanning every pulse and tremor. "This is no ordinary illness," he said finally. "Your blood carries a shadow, an unnatural weight that clings to life and drains it slowly. It is a poison, woven with magic older than any mortal king." Alara's eyes widened. "Poison, magic," Kale nodded. "Yes, someone intends to harm you. Or perhaps to use you as a tool against me, against my kingdom. Either way, it is clever and cruel." Fear gripped her, not only for her life but for the realization that she had walked into a web of schemes far larger than herself. Can it be cured?" she asked, voice trembling. Kale's expression darkened. "Perhaps, but the remedy is not simple. It requires knowledge, strength, and courage. You have the first two, I will help with the third." Alara met his gaze. There was something unspoken in his eyes, a mixture of concern, curiosity, and something else. A pull she could not name. It made her pulse quicken even as her body fought the poison's invisible grip. I do not want to be a burden," she whispered. "You are no burden," Kale replied, his voice almost gentle. "But do not pretend that your life is yours alone to guard. There are forces at work beyond your understanding." They spent the day searching the castle's archives, poring over ancient scrolls and tomes. Kale guided her hand when she struggled to decipher symbols older than any language she had studied. The work was exhausting, but the proximity to Kale made every moment electric. He did not touch her unnecessarily, yet his presence was a constant, magnetic pressure that made her heart race and her mind whirl. As dusk fell, the mist outside thickened, pressing against the castle walls. Shadows seemed to move independently, curling in the corners of the corridors and halls. Alara shivered. "Do you feel it?" she asked softly. Kale paused, turning his head slowly toward her. "The poison is not just physical," he said. "It has a mind, a will. Whoever or whatever placed it intended to observe, to manipulate. It whispers in shadows, waits in corners. You feel it because it is reaching for you." Alara swallowed hard. "So it is alive." "Alive, yes. Intelligent, yes, and patient. That is what makes it dangerous." Night descended fully, and Kale insisted that Alara rest. But sleep came in fitful waves, haunted by strange visions of twisting shadows and whispering voices. In the deepest hour, she felt a presence at the edge of her mind, like a cold finger tracing her thoughts. Her eyes flew open and the room was empty, save for Kale, who had silently appeared at the doorway. You felt it, he said, not accusing but stating a fact. Yes, Alara whispered. It tried to speak to me. Kale's expression was grim. The poison's magic can reach beyond the body. It can attempt to frighten, to confuse, to break you. That is why I must remain close. For hours, Kale sat in the chair beside her bed, silent but watchful. He spoke rarely, only to reassure her or to guide her breathing when the poison's influence caused panic. She noticed, with a mixture of fear and fascination, how different he seemed from the distant king she had first met. Here, he was careful, alert, almost human in concern. By dawn, the first light crept weakly through the thick curtains. Alara had survived the night, but her body was pale and weak. Kale's gaze lingered on her face as he rose. You are stronger than I imagined, he said, but strength alone will not defeat this. Alara nodded, feeling both humbled and encouraged. Then, what must we do? Kale's eyes gleamed with a dangerous clarity. We must find the source. The poison did not appear by accident. Someone placed it or something, and it is tied to the castle itself. Alara's brow furrowed. Tied to the castle, but I have been careful. I did not touch anything unusual. Kale's lips curved into a shadow of a smile. Clever human, but the poison is not simple. It hides in the air, in the stones, in places you cannot see. It tests you, waits for weakness, and strikes when you are most vulnerable. The day passed with careful investigation. They traced the edges of the castle, examining walls, floors, and hidden alcoves. Alara's body protested at every step, her strength waning, yet her determination burned brighter than ever. She refused to let the poison defeat her. Kale watched her closely, noting every falter, every flicker of pain. His centuries of experience taught him that humans often underestimated the subtle dangers around them. Yet, despite the growing threat, he found himself admiring her courage, her stubborn resolve. She was fragile, yes, but she was also brilliant, unyielding, and alive in a way that centuries of immortality had dulled his perception to. As night fell again, they returned to the grand chamber. Kale summoned a circle of protective wards, ancient and potent, to shield Alara while they worked. He traced runes with meticulous precision, his voice low and resonant as he chanted words in a language older than memory. The room pulsed with energy, a golden light against the darkness of the castle. Alara watched him, awe mingled with fear. Your magic, it is incredible, she whispered. Kale did not reply immediately. His crimson eyes were fixed on her, and for a moment she felt as though he were reading her soul. Finally, he spoke. It is nothing without your courage. This poison tests more than the body. It tests the mind, the heart. And you, Alara, you are not yet broken. That is why it seeks to bind you. A chill swept through the room, and the golden light of the wards flickered. Shadows gathered in corners, stretching and twisting as if alive. Alara felt a sudden sharp pain in her chest, and a whisper hissed in her ear, unintelligible yet terrifying. Kale moved instantly, stepping between her and the shadows. His voice rang out, commanding and powerful. Begone! The shadows recoiled, retreating into the darkness of the hall. Alara's pulse surged as the danger passed, and she collapsed against the floor, exhausted. Kale knelt beside her, placing a steadying hand on her shoulder. You see now, he said softly, this is no ordinary illness. You are caught in a web that seeks to consume you entirely, and we are only beginning to understand it. Alara looked up at him, fear and awe mingling. Then we must find it, we must stop it. Kale's eyes softened, though the crimson glow remained. Yes, we must. And know this, human, I will not allow you to die. Not while I can prevent it, but survival comes at a price, your trust, your courage, perhaps more than you realize. Alara nodded, her resolve hardened. She did not fully understand the danger, nor the depths of Kale's power, but she knew one truth. Her life, her knowledge, and even her heart were now tied to this immortal king. She could not step back. She would not. As the night closed in, the castle seemed to breathe with secrets and shadows. Somewhere deep in its ancient stones, the force behind the poison stirred, sensing resistance. And it whispered, cruel and patient, that the game had only just begun. The castle seemed to breathe around them, its cold stone walls alive with the whispers of centuries. Alara moved slowly through the corridors, each step a struggle against the poison that gripped her veins. The earlier protective wards Kale had placed glowed faintly, holding back the dark influence that sought to consume her. Yet, with every passing hour, she felt the shadow grow stronger, tugging at her strength, her mind, her very will to resist. Kale walked beside her, silent but alert. He had become more than a distant observer. He had taken on the role of a guardian, a sentinel who refused to leave her side. Every glance, every subtle movement revealed centuries of skill honed to protect, yet there was a tension in him she could not read. His eyes, crimson and piercing, betrayed a mix of concern, frustration, and something far deeper. "Alara," he said softly, breaking the heavy silence, "tell me, have you noticed any other changes? Dreams, whispers, visions?" She shook her head. "Only shadows and whispers at night. I thought it was my imagination." Kale's gaze darkened. "The poison does not allow imagination. It reaches into the mind, into memory and fear. What you hear is real, though not in the way you understand. It is probing, testing, waiting." They reached the inner sanctum, a circular chamber lined with tomes and artifacts from ages past. Kale moved to a massive chest and drew out an ancient scroll, its edges frayed and brittle. "This," he said, spreading it across the table, "contains knowledge of curses bound to the blood. I believe the poison you carry is tied to one such artifact, an object I sought long ago and abandoned. I thought it harmless in human hands, but I was wrong." Alara leaned forward, curiosity outweighing her exhaustion. "What kind of artifact?" Kale's eyes glimmered with the weight of memory. "It is called the Veil of Crimson Shadows. It was created to weaken kings and mortals alike, to twist life into submission. Whoever wields it can control the threads of vitality, but it is dangerous. Even the immortal who touches it risks corruption." Alara swallowed hard. "And it's here, in this castle," Kale nodded. "Yes, and it has marked you as its target. That is why the poison seeks you, why it flows in shadows and whispers. The veil hungers for life, and you, human, frail, defiant, are perfect for its claim." Fear tightened around her chest. The reality was worse than she had imagined. She was not merely sick. She was prey in a castle that had long been a place of darkness. Yet beneath the fear she felt a spark of determination. "Then we find it," she said firmly, "and we destroy it." Kale studied her for a long moment. "You are brave," he said, his voice almost reverent. "Bravery alone may not save you, Alara. The veil's power is subtle and cruel. It tests not just the body but the heart." Alara's pulse quickened, partly from the poison, partly from the intensity in his gaze. "I do not care," she whispered. "I will face it. Even if it kills me, I will not let it win." Kale's expression softened, though the crimson in his eyes never faded. "Very well," he said. "Then you must trust me completely. The veil is dangerous, yes, but there is another danger, a choice I must offer you. To survive, you may need a temporary bond, a sharing of life force. It will give you strength, but part of your freedom may be lost." Alara hesitated, the weight of the decision pressing on her chest. "A bond, with you?" Kale nodded. "Yes, it is the only way I can keep the poison from consuming you tonight. Without it, the veil will take more than your strength. It will take your life." The room was silent except for the faint hiss of the wind through the castle's cracks. Alara looked at Kale, her pride wrestling with her fear. She could feel the warmth of his presence, the strange pull that had grown between them since the first night. Her body was weak, her pulse erratic, yet a part of her longed to accept his offer, to trust the immortal who had become her protector. I will do it," she said finally, her voice trembling but resolute. Kale's eyes softened, a rare warmth touching his otherwise cold features. He reached out slowly, placing his hand over hers. The air around them shimmered with an unseen power, and a golden light began to flow between them, illuminating the chamber with a soft, ethereal glow. The bond was immediate and overwhelming. Ilara felt a surge of strength pulse through her veins, pushing back the poison that had clawed at her body. Her mind cleared, and for the first time since arriving at the castle, she felt hope. Yet with the gift came a strange weight, a connection to Kale that was both comforting and frightening. She could feel his thoughts, his awareness brushing against hers like a shadow in sunlight. Kale withdrew his hand, and the glow faded, leaving them both breathless. "The bond is temporary," he said, his voice steady, "but it will protect you from the poison long enough for us to act. You must remain vigilant. The veil will not give up so easily." Ilara nodded, still feeling the echo of the bond lingering in her veins. "I understand," she whispered. They prepared to confront the source. Following Kale's guidance, they moved to the deepest level of the castle, a forgotten crypt beneath the foundations. The air was thick with the scent of earth and decay, and shadows clung to the walls like living things. Torches flickered as they descended, casting strange patterns across the stones. At the center of the crypt, on a pedestal of black marble, lay a small, ornate object wrapped in crimson silk. The veil of crimson shadows. Its surface pulsed faintly, as if it breathed. Dark tendrils of energy coiled around it, reaching out, testing the air. The poison's presence was strongest here, pressing against Ilara and Kale like a living weight. Kale stepped forward, his movements precise and deliberate. "This is it," he said. "We must destroy it together. Any hesitation and it will consume us." Ilara swallowed her fear, feeling the bond's warmth steady her resolve. "I am ready," she said. Kale nodded and placed his hand on the veil. The shadows reacted instantly, recoiling and lashing out toward him. Ilara followed, placing her hand atop his, letting the bond guide her. The veil writhed beneath their touch, a dark heartbeat in the center of the crypt. Energy surged between them, a clash of light and shadow. The air was filled with whispers, unintelligible but filled with malice. Ilara felt the poison fighting back, clawing at her body, tugging at her soul. Her knees threatened to buckle, but Kale's steady presence, the bond they shared, gave her strength. Together they focused, their wills intertwining. Kale's voice rang out, ancient words of command and protection spilling into the chamber. Ilara repeated after him, her voice trembling but determined. The shadows screamed, the veil pulsed violently, and then, with a sudden, shuddering cry, the object burst into a blinding golden light. When the light faded, the veil was gone. The shadows dissolved into nothingness, leaving the crypt silent. Ilara collapsed to the floor, exhausted, her body trembling from the effort. Kale knelt beside her, his hand steadying her, his crimson eyes softer now than they had ever been. "You did it," he said softly. "You survived. You are stronger than any human I have known." Ilara looked up at him, her exhaustion mingled with awe and something else, an unspoken connection, a bond forged in struggle and courage. "We did it," she whispered. "Together." Kale's gaze held hers, and for a fleeting moment, centuries of distance and pride fell away. Yet the danger was not entirely gone. He could feel remnants of the veil's influence, faint and lurking, a reminder that even victory came with shadows. Ilara shivered, not from weakness but from the intensity of the night's events. "Will it return?" she asked softly. Kale's expression darkened. "Perhaps. Shadows of that kind never vanish completely, but for now you live, and that is what matters." As they emerged from the crypt, the first light of dawn touched the castle walls. The mist had begun to lift, revealing the jagged cliffs and the endless sky beyond. Ilara felt the bond fade, leaving her stronger, yet aware that a piece of her life had been irrevocably intertwined with Kale's. The castle was silent, but somewhere in the distance, a faint whisper echoed, a reminder that the veil, or something like it, was never truly gone. And as Ilara looked at Kale, She understood that their fates were bound, not just by danger but by trust, courage, and a connection that neither fully understood yet. For the first time, she realized that the vampire king who had dismissed her human frailty was no longer just a ruler or a predator. He was a guardian, a partner, and perhaps something more. The wind stirred outside, carrying a chill and the faintest hint of shadows that had survived the light. The night had tested them both, and though they had emerged victorious, the true trials of their bond and of the castle's secrets were only beginning. The castle seemed quieter than usual, but the silence was heavy with anticipation. Even the stones felt watchful, as if holding their breath. Elara moved through the halls beside Kale, her steps more confident than the first day she had arrived. The bond they had shared in the crypt had left its mark, a subtle connection that gave her strength and courage even as her human body still trembled. Kale's crimson eyes scanned every shadow, every corner. Though the veil of crimson shadows had been destroyed, remnants of its magic lingered, and he could feel the faint pulse of dark energy stirring within the castle. Whoever or whatever had set the poison in motion had anticipated resistance, and he knew their trial was far from over. "Elara," he said, his voice low but urgent, "the veil was only part of it. Its creator, the one who sought to harm you to test my patience, remains. I can feel their presence. They wait for us to be overconfident." Elara nodded, gripping the hem of her cloak. "Then we face them together," she said, her voice steady despite the fear twisting in her stomach. She felt the weight of the bond still lingering, a thread between them that gave her courage. She did not fully understand it, but she trusted Kale with her life. The deeper they went into the castle's ancient catacombs, the air grew colder, and shadows clung more tightly to the walls. Faint whispers drifted through the stone corridors, unintelligible yet heavy with menace. Elara shivered, not from the cold but from the anticipation of what lay ahead. At the center of the catacombs, they reached a chamber unlike any other. The walls were carved with intricate runes, and a dark pool of liquid shimmered at the floor's center, reflecting a light that was not there. From it rose a figure, cloaked in shadows, its presence radiating power and cruelty. "You have survived longer than expected," the figure said, its voice echoing as though many spoke at once. "But your defiance ends here." Kale stepped forward, his posture calm, yet every muscle ready for battle. "Show yourself," he demanded. "Your tricks will not frighten me." The figure shimmered, and slowly a humanoid form became visible, a being cloaked in darkness, with eyes that gleamed like molten silver. "I am the keeper of the veil," it said, "and you human are fortunate. Most do not endure its wrath. But your presence, your bond with him makes this interesting." Elara swallowed hard. Fear pulsed through her veins, but she stood her ground. "I am not afraid," she said. "I will not be used or destroyed by your magic." The shadow laughed, a sound like wind through cracked tombstones. "Brave words, human, but bravery does not protect against centuries of malice." Kale moved closer to her, placing a protective hand on her shoulder. "Stand behind me if you must," he said softly, "but do not hide. Your courage is as much a weapon as my power." The shadow shifted, tendrils of dark energy curling toward them like living snakes. Elara felt the old fear try to grip her again, but she focused on the bond, the warmth and strength flowing between her and Kale. Together they were stronger than the shadow anticipated. Kale raised his hand, channeling centuries of power. "By my will and my life, I command the shadow to yield." His voice resonated through the chamber, echoing off the walls and sending waves of energy toward the dark figure. The shadow recoiled, lashing out, but Elara joined Kale, placing her hand over his, repeating the words he had taught her in the crypt. Her voice, human yet filled with determination, mingled with his, creating a harmony that neither darkness nor poison could resist. The shadow shrieked, swirling violently as the light of their combined will pushed against it. Energy crackled, the chamber trembling under the force. Alara felt herself falter, the remnants of the poison trying to reclaim her strength. Kale's grip tightened, anchoring her to the moment, to the bond, to life itself. "You are stronger than I imagined," Kale said, his voice low and steady amidst the chaos. "Do not give in. Not now, not ever." Alara drew a deep breath, summoning every ounce of courage left. "We will not be defeated," she said firmly, her voice rising over the shadow's screech. "Not by you, not by fear, not by darkness." The shadow thrashed violently, then suddenly froze, caught in the brilliance of their combined energy. Kale's eyes glowed brighter, and the bond pulsed between them like a living heartbeat. In a final surge of effort, they pushed their will outward, and the shadow exploded in a flash of golden light, dissipating into nothingness. The chamber fell silent. Only the faint hum of lingering magic remained. Alara collapsed to her knees, exhausted, trembling but alive. Kale knelt beside her, steadying her. His crimson eyes softened, his usual intensity replaced with something gentler, almost vulnerable. "You have done it," he said, voice quiet. "The threat is gone, at least for now." Alara looked at him, awe and gratitude mingling with something deeper she could not yet name. "We did it together," she whispered. Kale studied her, his expression unreadable for a moment. Then, with a motion almost too subtle to notice, he brushed a strand of hair from her face. "You are remarkable, Alara, braver than any human I have known and wiser than many immortals. This bond, it is more than power. It is respect, trust, perhaps something else." Alara's heart raced, the weight of his words settling in. She had always thought of Kale as distant, cold, unfeeling, but now she saw a glimpse of the being beneath the legend. Centuries of solitude had shaped him, yet here he was, offering not just protection but acknowledgement, understanding, and perhaps affection. The bond between them faded naturally, leaving them both stronger but changed. Alara could still feel the subtle warmth of connection, a reminder of the shared ordeal that had shaped them. Kale rose, extending a hand to her. She took it, and together they left the chamber, the castle's shadows seeming less threatening, the air lighter, though still tinged with the faintest echo of lingering danger. As they emerged into the courtyard, the first light of dawn bathed the towers in a gentle golden glow. Mist curled around the cliffs, and the wind carried the distant scent of the sea. Alara felt the exhaustion of the past days weigh on her, yet also the thrill of survival, of victory earned not by luck but by courage, trust, and unity. Kale stood beside her, silent, watching the horizon. "You have changed," he said finally, "not just in strength but in spirit. You survived what most mortals could not, and yet it is more than survival that matters now." Alara turned to him, sensing the depth behind his words. "What do you mean?" she asked softly. Kale's crimson eyes met hers, unflinching, intense, and yet gentle. "I have dismissed human frailty for centuries, seeing it as weakness. But you have shown me that it is not weakness at all. Courage, defiance, compassion, these are strengths mortals possess that immortals often forget. And perhaps I have learned that even I am capable of something more than solitude and control. Perhaps I am capable of redemption." Alara's breath caught. She had come seeking knowledge of plants, of life, of ways to help her people. She had found danger, poison, shadows, but also a connection she had never expected, to a being who was both terrifying and awe-inspiring, distant, and yet profoundly present. Kale reached out and gently took her hand. "You may have saved your life," he said, voice low, almost a whisper against the dawn, "but what of my soul? It has been untouched for centuries until now." Alara felt a warmth spread through her chest, a mixture of fear, hope, and something deeper, a bond that had been forged in struggle and courage. "Then we face it together," she whispered. The wind stirred, carrying the faintest trace of shadow from the depths of the castle, a reminder that evil never truly disappears, only waits. But for the first time, Alara felt no fear. They had faced darkness, poison, and shadow, and had emerged not only alive but stronger, connected, and changed. Kale looked down at her, a small, almost imperceptible smile touching his lips. "Then let the world witness," he said softly. "For even in darkness, even in shadow, we are not lost, not while we walk together." Alara nodded, her hand tightening around his. She could feel the pulse of life, of hope, of shared courage between them. For the first time, she understood that even the most powerful immortal could be touched, changed, and redeemed, not by strength alone, but by trust, by loyalty, and by the quiet, unyielding courage of a human heart. As the sun rose over the cliffs, spilling light across the towers of the castle, the shadows receded, leaving only the promise of a new day. And in that golden morning, Kale and Alara stood side by side, survivors of a trial that had tested both their bodies and their hearts, united by courage, trust, and the bond they had forged. The castle remained ancient, its stones heavy with secrets and shadows, but for the first time in centuries it felt alive with hope.